This is an excerpt taken from my book, The Sun Lady Unveiled. The Sun Lady also has strong Hebrew and Canaanite roots in their goddess tradition. One can see references to this in the New Testament as well. A case can be made to suggest that the lost Hebrew goddess has its origins in Babylonian myths and legends. For example, the whore Babylon's full name in Revelation 17:5 is Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and abominations of the earth. This is a clear reference to Ishtar, who is also both the queen of heaven and the harlot, among other goddesses like the Ophite Gnostic version of Sophia, who is also called Prunikos, meaning the lewd one, as reported by Origen in Against Celsus. In Thunder Perfect Mind, Sophia paradoxically calls herself the whore and the holy one. The second treatise of the Great Seth also specifically calls Sophia both our sister and a whore. In Catholicism, Catholic priests are shamans who have apostolic mojo and turn the bread and the wine into the body and blood of Christ. The Pope is worshipped as a human demigod like Caesar or Hercules, and Mary herself is clearly a goddess and more important in Catholic devotion than Jesus. Even their Mother of God title infers that she precedes Jesus in the divine hierarchy. Barbara Walker, in the Woman's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets, tells us more background on Ishtar, the queen of prostitution and war, connects her with all of these characters. The whore of Babylon could also be a reference to Lilith. Now, as I quote from Barbara Walker's book, the Babylonian star, the great goddess, who appears in the Bible as Ashtaroth, Anath, Meshar, or Esther, the queen of heaven. She was also the great whore, described in Revelation 17:5. Another of her titles was the goddess Har, who called herself the compassionate prostitute. Men communed with her through the sexual rites of her harlot priestesses. Babylonian scriptures called Ishtar the light of the world, leader of hosts, opener of the womb, righteous judge, lawgiver, goddess of goddesses, bestower of strength, framer of all decrees, lady of Ishtar victory, forgiver of sins, etc. Much of the liturgical flattery addressed to God in the Old Testament was plagiarized from Babylonian prayers to Ishtar. Elsewhere in the same book, Walker connects the whore of Babylon with Mary Magdalene. Origen showed a mystical devotion to Mary Magdalene, quoting from Barbara Walker's book, confusing her with the goddess by calling her the mother of all of us, and sometimes Jerusalem, and sometimes the church, which is another title of the Virgin. Origen claimed Mary Magdalene was immortal, having lived from the beginning of time. Thus, it seems Mary, the whore, was only another form of Mary the Virgin, otherwise the triple goddess, Mary, Anna, and Ishtar, the great whore Babylon, who was worshipped along with her Savior Son in the Jerusalem temple. The Gospel Mary said all three Marys of the canonical books were one and the same. Indeed, the Virgin and whore were still confused with one another in the 7th century, when on the day of the Nativity of the Blessed Virgin, Pope Sergius instituted an annual procession to the old temple of the prostitute goddess Libera, changing the temple's name to Santa Maria Maggiore, Most Great Holy Mary. It was not made clear which Holy Mary was meant. A Gnostic poem merged the two of them as a primal feminine power. I am the first and the last. I am the honored one and the scorned one. I am the whore and the holy one. Mary Magdalene means she of the temple. The Jerusalem temple had a triple power representing the triple deity. One tower bearing the name of heaven of the queen, Mariamne, an earthly incarnation of the goddess Mary. This was the same Miriam or Mary, who took Joseph for her lover. 12 priestesses of this temple apparently subsidized Jesus and his companions, according to Luke 8:1-3, which says Jesus in the 12 were financially supported by Mary Magdalene and a group of women. Latin texts say that the women provided for him, Jesus, but Greek texts make it them. The triple goddess motif also appears in the Gospel of Philip when it says there were three who always walked with the Lord: Mary, his mother, and his sister, and Mary Magdalene, the one who is called his compassion. His sister and his mother and his companion were each a Mary. Margaret Barker in Where Shall Wisdom Be Found connects the Orthodox infancy Gospel of James with the Sun Lady. The woman in the Holy of Holies, clothed to the sun, giving birth to the Messiah, as I quote from an article, must have prompted the early church to tell the story of Mary as the story of wisdom. The infancy Gospel of James is not easy to date, but Justin in the mid-century knew that the birth had taken place in a cave. Clement of Alexandria at the end of the 2nd century knew that Mary was a virgin after giving birth, and Origen knew that Joseph had been a widower with other children. All details unique to account. A papyri of the infancy Gospel of James, dated to the end of the 3rd century, is the oldest known complete Gospel text. The infancy Gospel of James tells us how Mary was given to the temple when she was 3 years old, like the infant Samuel. The priest received her and sat her on the 3rd step of the altar, and she danced at his feet at the temple. She was fed by an angel and grew up in the temple until at the age of 12 and the onset of puberty she had to leave. A husband was found for her, Joseph, who was a widower with sons. When a new veil was needed for the temple, 7 young women were chosen to spin the wool and weave. Mary was one of them, and while she was spinning, the angel told her that she would give birth to the Son of God, of the Most High. Mary spinning the red wool as the angel speaks to her become the icon of the Annunciation. The little girl in the temple dancing before the high priest is exactly how wisdom was described in Proverbs 8, playing and dancing before the Creator. Like wisdom, Mary is depicted in icons as seated in the Holy of Holies, being fed by an angel. She left the holy place to give birth to her child, like the woman clothed with the sun, appearing through the open veil of the Holy of Holies. While she was weaving the new veil, the symbol of incarnation, she was pregnant with her child. And in icons, she is shown holding her spindle, the ancient symbol of the Great Lady. The Queen of Heaven and her Son were Mary and her Son. And just as Jesus was proclaimed the Lord, the God of Israel, so Mary was depicted as the Great Lady, his mother. Earlier in the paper, Margaret Barker also connects the mother with naturally the Canaanite Asherah, the Queen of Heaven and Mother of the Gods. And as I quote, graffiti have been found on 2 large storage jars at Kuntalit, Adrud, in the southern desert, which seems to have been a resting place for pilgrims on the way to Jerusalem. I bless you by Yahweh of Samaria, and by Asherata, says one, and the other, I bless you by Yahweh of Taman and by Asherah. There has been endless debate about these inscriptions and how the name Asherata relates to the Old Testament name Asherah, given that Asherata is a constant form and Yahweh is defined by his cult center, Taman, Samaria. It looks as though Asherata was singular figure, perhaps the mother of the Lord. These are the tablets found at the site of an ancient Ugarit at the coast of Syria, which describes the great goddess Atherat, the same name of Asherata. She was their great lady, the Virgin Mother of the 70 sons of the high god El, a god who was often depicted as a bull. She was a sun deity. She was the lamp of the gods, the bright one, and her symbol was a spindle. She had several names: Atharat, Rameh, and Shapsh. She was a nursing mother of the earthly king, who was known as the morning star and the evening star, and it seems that she was represented by the winged sun disk over the head of the king, showing that she was his heavenly mother. It is bad practice to reconstruct the male god of Israel from the biblical text and the female from the archaeological evidence, as this gives the impression that the lady cannot be found in written sources. The correspondence between the Great Lady of Ugarit and the Lost Lady of Jerusalem is, however, striking, as we shall see that the Lady of Jerusalem was described as a winged deity, the mother of the king named the morning star, and the mother of the sons of El, i.e. the angels. The advantage of having archaeological evidence to support a hypothesis constructed from text is that archaeological evidence is less likely to have been edited, although the archaeological reports from the first half of the last century show that numbers of these figurines were discarded as rubbish because they had no possible relevance to Bible or biblical archaeology. In Temple Theology, an introduction by Margaret Barker, she reveals that Yahweh has feminine aspects, which could also refer to lost tradition of Asherah, but absorbed by Yahweh, the Queen of Heaven, Shekinah, Sophia, which are all avatars of the Sun Lady. Her symbol is also a tree of fire, much like the esoteric doctrines of Simon Magus. And as we saw in the previous chapter, Isaiah 44, Yahweh as having both male and female traits, since he gives birth to Israel, as well as being depicted as an authority fatherly figure to the angels that rules over the nation. And as I quote from Margaret Barker's book, the lady's tree of fire appears in another story, where her demise is a preface to the story of Moses and Exodus. The burning bush was her tree of fire. The story of Moses learning the new name for God at the burning bush is recognized by scholars as the point at which the compilers of the Pentateuch joined together the two traditions. Abraham, Melchizedek, and the patriarchs were all joined to Moses and the Exodus, and the God of the patriarchs was renamed. At the burning bush, a voice called the name to be used in the future was Yahweh. Later we read, God said to Moses, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known. Ezekiel had described the voice of the living one as a voice of Shaddai. Now Shaddai has been translated in various ways, most often by Almighty. But the usual meaning of this Hebrew word is breast, suggesting that the El Shaddai had a female aspect. In the stories of the patriarchs, El Shaddai was associated with the gift of fertility. May El Shaddai bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you. I am El Shaddai, the fruitful. Be fruitful and multiply. Kings shall spring from you. El Shaddai, who will bless you with the blessings of the breast and of the womb. If the story of the burning bush does represent the transition from the older religion to that of the Deuteronomist, then we should have an explanation for the later Christian custom of representing Mary by the burning bush. The fiery tree had been the ancient symbol for the mother of the Lord. Sometimes Mary is depicted literally within the burning bush. Sometimes there is simply a fiery tree named the Mother of God, and sometimes the burning bush icon depicts mother and son surrounded by the angels of the weathers, that is, the angels of day one in the Holy of Holies. Elsewhere, in another book of Margaret Barker, The Great Angel, a study of Israel's second god, she writes how Sophia and the later Gnostic tradition can be traced back to this first temple Judaism, which is fundamentally polytheistic. And as I quote, the most striking evidence for Gnostic roots in the ancient temple traditions is their detailed knowledge of the roles of Sophia in wisdom. Throughout the text, she appears either as a consort or counterpart or the mother of the second deity, the Great Archon. She is clearly identical with the wisdom figure of the biblical and non-canonical book texts, yet her role cannot be deduced entirely from them. The Gnostic Sophia is all that remains of Israel's goddess. Christians know that Christ was the power of God, the angel, and also the wisdom of God. He was the incarnation of both aspects, but the female element had been purged from Israel's cult, and from our reading of the Old Testament by the reformers of the 7th century BC. The most enigmatic of Enoch's histories of Israel says the wisdom was forsaken just before the destruction of the first temple by those who had become blinded, according to 1 Enoch 93:8. And the refugees described by Jeremiah vowed they should resume the worship of the Queen of Heaven, since neglect of her had caused disaster, according to Jeremiah 44:17-19. To say that wisdom was personified in later texts is to prejudge the issue, especially when there are inscriptions from the 8th century BC showing a consort for Yahweh. The separation of Yahweh and his female consort by the 7th century reformers of Israel's cult was probably recorded in the tradition that the Archon became arrogant and claimed to be the only God when he lost sight of the power of his mother and did not recognize that she existed. He claimed the powers of creation for himself alone. Now in Ellen Lloyd's Lost and Forgotten Goddess Asherah, queen consort of the Sumerian god Anu and the Uridic god El, she mentions Asherah poles, which sounds suspiciously like the healing caduceus poles that Moses once erected in Numbers, and is equated by Jesus with himself in John 3, discussed further onward. And I quote, "The word Asherah is translated in Greek as alsos, grove, or alse, groves, or occasionally by dendra trees. Asherah poles, which were sacred trees or poles, are mentioned many times in the Hebrew Bible. Asherah poles were also known in Scripture as the Asherah places. This is likely due to the connection of worship upon hilltops and mountains. The first mention of the Asherah pole is in Exodus 34:13. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, and cut down their Asherah poles. The Israelites were commanded to destroy all Asherah poles they found among other people in the land. In Deuteronomy 16:21, the Lord commanded the people of Israel to not make Asherah poles of their own. However, it did not take long for the Israelites to disobey his command. In Judges 3:7, we read, "And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Asheroth. Instead of obeying God's commands, they worshipped the gods of the people God sent them to drive out." It is believed that many Asherah poles were raised in honor of the mother goddess Asherah. The purpose of the object remains a subject of heated debate among scholars. The whole subject becomes even more complicated due to the discovery of ancient inscriptions unearthed at Kuntalit, Arjud. The inscriptions are religious in nature, invoking Yahweh, El, and Baal. What created an intense debate are the inscriptions that include the phrases Yahweh of Samaria and Asherah, or his Asherah, and Yahweh of Teman and his Asherah. Who or what was Asherah? The answer to this question depends on the scholar's interpretation of Asherah in relation to Yahweh. Finally, snakes in the Bible are both good and evil. Pharaoh had snakes, but Moses had a good snake, according to Exodus 7:8-12. Poisonous snakes killed the Israelites in the desert, but a bronze snake named Nehushtan saved them, according to Numbers 21:5-9. Jesus claimed to be that same bronze snake set on a pole, which also functions like the axis mundi. Interestingly, that same bronze snake was destroyed by the king Hezekiah, according to 2 Kings 18, who also had allowed the Jerusalem temple priests to take over the nation. Hezekiah also tore down the altars of Yahweh and made an unholy alliance with Babylon, upon which the prophet Yahweh placed a prophetic curse, according to 2 Kings 18 and Isaiah 39. Hence Hezekiah was a type of Antichrist who brought the wrath of God upon the Israelite nation. Such was his penalty for destroying the snake god Nehushtan, for Nehushtan was a prototype of Christ. For our purposes, the sacred trees of the garden, serpents, and goddess veneration form a trinity of meaning, which we will continue to unravel in this book. As monotheism evolves through history, these symbols are either inverted, changed, or rejected outright. You can find this and more information in my book, The Sun Lady Unveiled, and on my website, theani.com.